starting. It will show when we're live on Facebook. Okay, I think we're live on Facebook now on our page. Welcome to the Migrant Women Reality Watch number 19. And today is International Migrants Day. Obviously a very significant day for our network, for our members, for migrant women, refugee women and girls. And for this reason, we are having today with us two of our members. We have Debbie, who is in Athens, and she is a co-founder of Melissa Network of Migrant Women in Greece, who are our members and extremely, extremely active on various issues of protection of the rights of migrant and refugee women. And it's an amazing organization that I invite everyone to have a look at if you're not familiar with their work, because they're doing great work on the ground, supporting refugee women, and they're led by migrant women. And we also have Frohar with us, who is our volunteer in Brussels, and she's a researcher. And she, in fact, is one of the authors of this document that we published today, and it's also attached in the post. It's a very brief assessment of the new migration pact designed by the European Commission, which is a very complex and complicated set of documents that has numerous annexes and proposals for regulations that we looked at from one specific perspective. It is a perspective of women, women's rights, migrant, refugee, women and girls. And the reason we're having this discussion today is to give our feedback to this document from our perspective as migrant women, firstly, and also to hear a little bit about the alternative documents that exist. They have a little bit different legal meaning, but we're looking forward to hear from Debbie about this. So, in fact, I would like to start by asking each of you if you could just present your opinion, your analysis on the Migration and Asylum Pact that the European Commission published in September. And it also has one part on integration, so it's an action plan on integration. What do you think about it? What does it mean for an organization like yours, Debbie, who deals with migrant women on the ground, who is also based in the country that receives most of refugee women and refugees generally? What do you think about it, and what Frohar thinks about it? Well, let's start with Debbie.
Okay, so I believe that this EU Pact on Migration is mostly focused on migration governance, which aims to curb the entry of migrants and refugees in Europe. So it doesn't guarantee that member states will fulfill their obligations to protect, respect and promote the human rights of all migrants and refugees in Europe. So, and I think that the pact is not also gender sensitive in the way that it doesn't mention at all, women, and we all know that women comprise more than half of the people who are migrating and seeking asylum. So they experience, different realities from male refugees and migrants because they are women. Some of them are, are pregnant. Some of them are bringing along their children, so they have to support themselves and to support their children while on the move. And some of them are also victims of, most of them are victims of gender-based violence back from their home country, even along their journey, and even in the transit countries or at the borders itself. So these are the realities that migrant women or refugee women are facing on a daily basis, which the pact doesn't address at all. So I think it's important for us women to, as member of the civil society organizations, to continue pressing, the European Union by joining alternative groups like the PTT, which I would describe later, and so that our voices could be binded in such a way to create a strong voice where all migrants and refugee communities will be able to raise their sentiments and their concerns about the issues that they themselves are experiencing.
Thank you, Debbie. Frohar, do you want to add anything to this?
Well, I quite agree. I mean, I agree with Debbie. I've read through the pack several times, not to be judgmental about the pack and not to be critical, but the pack does not give me that opportunity, unfortunately. The pack is quite vague. It makes points, but it doesn't clarify, or it's not clear on some points. But like Debbie, I'm quite disheartened to see that it has zero mention of women, girl, or female in the pack. So it doesn't mention anything about women, girls, or female even in the pack, whereas it makes half of that migration. But also it's really targeting asylum seekers. It's for people who comes and seeks asylum in Europe, and they really want to stop those people from seeking asylum in Europe. So, and second, what is personally for me is the focus on this effective solidarity mechanism, where they want to relocate or return procedures. It's quite disappointing for me, and it raises many questions. In 20 pages of the pack, there are 28 times mention of return. So they're really focusing on returning asylum seekers, even those who are successful to cross the border, to return them back. It's kind of okay. Some parts, for example, relocate if the country is at the risk of asylum flow. So they are proposing that each another member state to take over or relocate those asylum seekers, but it doesn't give an indication, or it's not clear how they will do this, the procedures or the measures of how this relocate will happen, especially taking migrant or asylum seeking women and girls. Then they want a member state to take responsibility of returning the asylum seekers back. So there are 2 points in regards to this mechanism. Actually, there are 3. There's one relocate, one return, and the other is to a member state to take other measures. It doesn't specify what kind of measures. I'm assuming is financial measures that they have to take if they want to take responsibility of taking asylum seeker from overflowing country, or to return them back. So it's quite vague, and it's really it doesn't clarify of how these measures will happen or take place. The other point was that I'm quite is the talent procedure. So in a point, they say talent partnership for better job opportunities at home and legal routes to the UK. So it means like they want to deport or return asylum seekers back to the country of our asylums where they come from. But at the same time, they want to promote migration or refugee on skilled and qualifications. So they want really are promoting or encouraging member states to have skilled and qualified refugees that the EU needs in Europe, but they want to kind of deport and return asylum seekers back to where they come from. So this is kind of also was a little bit disappointing for me to see that they're concentrating on this rather than having procedures in place to have I don't know, training and qualification. I mean, retrain asylum seekers, accept them, and retrain them. So these are kind of, yeah, gray area in the pact, but it has many other gray areas in the pact that we can talk about. These were the most important for me, especially in regards to migrant women and girls.
May I also add? It's also ironic that the EU Pact was, compared to a house, a 3-floor house. The first floor being, member states seeks establishing specific partnerships with countries of origin, and using, I think, the carrot and stick approach, so that they would readmit the migrants or refugees that have reached the soil in Europe. So and it also reinforced the securitization and management of the external borders of EU. So again, it also presents a quicker selection procedures and return mechanisms, as what she said, my friend here said, to prevent people to set foot in Europe, and the so-called solidarity mechanism, where they, I think it's a misnomer. It's a misuse of the word solidarity, because it's for solidarity for them. It's just dividing the responsibility among states on how they could curb migration and how they could implement measures that would really create exclusion, on the part of, the third country nationals seeking, asylum here in Europe.
Well, speaking about creating exclusion, this is partly what is in our statement on the pact from women's rights perspective, because going back to what Frohar mentioned about this focus, exclusive practically focus on attracting skills and talents, like this is who is welcome in Europe, and so everybody else is not. And we know, of course, the situation of women around the globe. We know that in many countries, women are in extremely underprivileged situation where they do not have access to education, or they do not have access to formal education and recognized qualifications and skills, or they do not have access to those skills that European Union needs right now in this point, that they recognize like high-level skills. So we know that this focus on attracting skills and talents is creating the conditions that disqualify a large amount of women from accessing asylum, or accessing migration in this case, or what also asylum in the EU in the first place. And speaking more concretely, what I wanted to ask you, Debbie, so for example, our statement is called The Pact Through the Eyes of Women. So, we were thinking, okay, let's be concrete. If there is a woman and she arrives to Greece or to Italy, to a hot spot, and then she needs to go through this screening procedures or this identification, and let's say she's alone, let's say that she doesn't have documents, and let's say, which is most often the case, she has been sexually violated on her way and traumatized and in other ways abused, and now she is immediately interrogated upon arrival and need to kind of present her case in a clear way to prove while she's claiming asylum and to prove her legitimacy. So I'd like to hear from how do you think like these screening procedures and identification would be implemented in practice, or somewhere on the Greek islands, for example, or in some other places in Greece, in your experience, Debbie?
I think the example in the case in point is the Moria. What's this? The Moria refugees who are, forced to stay in a detention camp for almost, 4 years now, and many are women and children, and have been there for 2 to 3 years or 4 years now. So there has been a backlog of response and with regards to their asylum seeking procedures, and especially now that with the COVID-19, the closing of the asylum service, so all the more that schedules and of interviews and and submission of papers and documents have been postponed because the asylum service has closed because of the pandemic, because of the lockdown. So more thousands of women and men are now, of course, in limbo status because what's this their asylum seeking papers are not dealt with up to now.
Mm-hmm. Frohar, do you have anything to add on this? I know you also have experience in a grassroots work with refugees and refugee women. How do you see this implemented in practice, these screening procedures?
Yeah, this is quite problematic, and I think the pact is again very vague and contradictory. And it does, of course, it doesn't mention asylum seeking women or female, but in regards to the procedure in to all migrants is quite vague. It doesn't specify how it will happen, and especially in regards to migrant or asylum seeking women who are coming from perhaps war-torn countries. How is this going to happen in regards to people who are interviewing them? Like in the packet says, they will be interviewed straight away once they disembark. So who is interviewing them? What gender? Some women will not be able to speak to male because culturally they never spoken to another person, maybe other than their brother or father or their husband. How if the interviewer is a man, how that will have an impact on the interview session, or and also the screening. I think you have to kind of or yeah, are they trained, like the agents who are interviewing them, are they trained enough to interview someone who has experienced domestic violence or sexual exploitation, who have been through traumatic time, not just through their journey, but also in the country of origin as well. And what impact does it have? Because it says in the pact that the decision will be made on the spot. And if the women cannot explain themselves, how this asylum system or procedure will have an impact on their acceptance of the application for asylum.
Yeah, that will really pose a big problem because from our experience, let's say at Melissa, it took us weeks to really enable women to speak up, to talk about their own experience, especially those who are survivors of gender-based violence. So our social workers and team of psychologists have worked with them individually and in group therapy sessions in order to create a community where a safe community where they can express themselves freely without fear of being judged or being being judged that they don't deserve to be able to be part of the community that they have entered, or in Europe. So it's a big issue. It's a big problem because we have many women participants who have up to now been waiting even just for an interview, first interview. So it's really, I don't know how, with the current situation now, I don't know how the new European Pact will be able to manage, to do it in a quicker manner on the spot, because will there be translators? Will there be social workers? Will there be psychologists who will assist, women who have been to a traumatic experience, or who have been to a life and death situation? So this kind of thing are important, for women to be able to really feel safe and trust, and have trust that they will be respected, and their opinions will be valued.
But can I just come in? Like, this is the issue with the pact, because the pact talks over and over again about returns, like swift returns. So they want to interview people on the spot, and they just want to send it back. But even this mechanism, this solidarity mechanism, is made for returning. So if they can't return, they want the member states who are taking them to return the asylum seekers back. So my question, or the issue I have, is that whether, because now I know that asylum seekers, if you are refused, you can reapply again. So you have 3 chances to reapply for asylum. But in the packet, it doesn't mention how many times you can reapply. If you're relocated, will you be able to reclaim or reapply for asylum procedure because you're in a different country? Maybe in the country you were, like Greece, let's say, you didn't have opportunity to access legal services. You didn't have opportunity to have a lawyer. If you are, let's say, if Germany accepts you, will you have the right to have access to those services and reclaim or reapply for claim to asylum again? So these are not mentioned in the pack at all. The pack says we do this screening, these interviews, and then we will send you to another member state, but the member state have the right to return you.
Yeah.
So it's not clear. So I think that the pack is really designed to kind of have a really clear message for people to say, don't come to Europe.
Yeah, I think that is,
otherwise you will be sent back.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the impression that we all got. And of course, it's been a few months, a couple of months at least, that the pact has been published, and a lot of civil society organizations, migrant refugee organizations at the European level, national level, they produce their reaction. So we already know the analysis is there, and there is a certain amount of pressure from the civil society for the pact not to be adopted in its current form and to be amended. Again, the expectations are, I think, are not very high considering the general situation, both in the council, I mean, among the states with regards to migration. And then as an addition to this, for migrant women, we observe this complete neutrality. And as you said, Debbie and Frohar, that women do not exist in the pact. We're not acknowledged as a separate group. And this is despite the legal obligation of the European Union to do the so-called gender mainstreaming in all of their policies. So it's actually not a matter of luxury. It's a matter of legal obligation. Now, we do not want to be mainstream in any policies that are harmful by default. This is not what we're asking here. So there are some aspects of the pact that are problematic on their own. So we're not saying, oh yeah, let's fix it by putting women in there. Those things needs to be changed, like this proposal with the returns, for example. But in some other aspects, when they are speaking about respect to human rights, it's very, very generic. And we know when it is generic, it is understood as a male migrant, because this is like a traditional template of a migrant. I want to speak about the returns. what they call the sponsored returns, when actually the deportation, right? And here we have a number of issues, of course, when it comes to women, as well as generally refugees, but we know that there are certain countries, like Afghanistan, for example, that is recognized by the European Union as the so-called safe country, right? And we know that women often flee countries like Afghanistan for the reasons that you don't necessarily trace to political conflict or a war, even though those are also important reasons, but it's the reasons of male violence against women. Now, this is apparently safe, and it's safe for women. So the question is, again, how this will be taken into consideration with this increased pressure on returning people. So we're wondering how many of those returns will be women, on which conditions they will be returned, who will make those assessments, and how actually the needs of the women will be recognized. It's not a question, I suppose, if you have any comments on this specifically on the return, and what is your experience with returns back to the country of origin, Debbie, in Greece, for example?
I think it starts with the pushback, that even before they reach the Greek soil or Greek borders, there has been a pushback by what's this, how do you say that, by police and naval army to push back migrants and refugees who are trying to get inside the Greek territory. So I think although there has been less deportations in Greece, but I think with this new pact, there will be an increase of return, voluntary return, as they say it. It's not called deportation, but voluntary returns, and that they will be able to provide resources enable for the migrants to voluntarily return to their country of origin. And that's what I think IOM has been doing in the past, recent past, where they encourage this voluntary repatriation, where they give certain amount of money to migrants who would like to return back to their country of origin, and which is just $300 or 300 euros plus their transportation, and they have to sign that they will not come back to to Greece or so things like that. So with this, I could somehow foresee that this is the same thing that the pact will do in collaboration with other international organizations or state mechanisms, in Greece or in other member countries,
Frohar, I'm sure you have to say something about this.
Yes. Well, for me, this return procedure, especially for women, has 2 points. First of all, some of these women who are fleeing war, they might be refugees in refugee camps already. So some of them might be born and brought up in refugee camps, let's say Syria or Afghanistan. Maybe some of these women are from Afghanistan, but they were refugees in Pakistan or Iran, and then they decide domestic violence. They decided to leave that and flee to Europe. When they are saying returning, where would they return them? Are they returning them back to Afghanistan, or are they returning them back to, let's say, Pakistan or Iran? And if they're returning them back to Afghanistan, maybe they already have no links in Afghanistan, because they are from Afghanistan, but they were brought up as refugees in other countries, in refugee camps, and they have gone through this sexual exploitation or domestic violence in these camps, and they had a chance to flee. So where are they going back? The second point is that the Pakists keep talking about returning migrants or asylum seekers back to the country of origin, but providing them, like working with the governments to provide them with training and qualifications so they can get back to work, and then return back to Europe, maybe through legal routes. And I don't understand what they mean by this point. Like they want to have a partnership with the country of origin that they do now. I mean, it's nothing new. Like, for example, 3 years ago, the president of Afghanistan came to Germany and he signed a paper saying we can take migrants back, send it back to us, and we will deal with them. But in regards to women, what will happen to them when they return back to Afghanistan? Because I know from first-hand experience, once there are, I don't know women, but from men's point of view, when they return back to Afghanistan, in the airports, there were no one to even receive them. They didn't know where to go. They were promised that in the airport that they will be taken care of, they will be taken to an accommodation, and then they will be offered job. Once they arrive there, there was nothing for them. So what will happen to women to get back in the airport and there's nothing for them, and they face other domestic situations, and also maybe the person who have been the perpetrator is waiting for them in the airport to get back to them and no route back. So this is my worry. Yeah, this is my worry about women being returned back to country of origin, or I don't know where they will be returned back, because when they gave interview, of course, they would say where they're from or where the routes they come from. That's my worry for women's safety. And yeah, from even human rights point of view, this is not the right way to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, these are just some of the issues that are problematic with this pact, and I understand that the European Commission keeps working on it. So because there are so multiple kind of pillars and objectives and annexes, and they're being published as they go. Like, for example, the integration action plan, which is a part of the pact, was published just in the end of November, which to our kind of more pleasant surprise has more emphasis on women. At least women are acknowledged as a group in the integration plan. There is an acknowledgement that this specific group is subjected to specific forms of discrimination, especially the labor exclusion. And we know that migrant women in Europe constitute the largest overqualified group and the largest underemployed group, both comparing to migrant men and to the native women in Europe. So thankfully, there is data on this, and European Institute for Gender Equality, for example, was conducting some research on this. So it's difficult to deny it. And while the integration action plan is definitely better in terms of acknowledging women's needs, what is really concerning for us is that we have an overall pact that is completely the so-called gender blind. And then there is one piece of it which somehow recognizes that women need specific support and specific structure. And obviously it goes down to funding and the organizations who are supporting them on the ground and different bodies. But it is completely disconnected from the overall framework of the pact that makes no such acknowledgement. So for us, it's also a policy coherence issue, which is not a rare thing to happen in the European Commission and the European Union, when we work on one area and we completely forget the other area. And then we wake up the next day and realize that the two do not work together. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that we have an integration plan, but it cannot be effective if it is not linked structurally to the entire migration pact that actually doesn't acknowledge women. which takes me to my last point or question to Debbie. It's a little bit different conversation, but I know that you personally and Melissa Network, you are partners or one of the initiators of the alternative pact, the Pact of Solidarity, which is kind of co-created by a number of organizations, but I understand this is an outcome of the Permanent People Tribunal on Migrants and Refugees, and I know you were very active in this, and we signed this alternative pact as a network. Please, could you tell us what is this about, what people need to know about it, and at which stage you are with this pact?
Okay, so in 2017, we started with the 46th session of the Permanent People's Tribunal. It's PPT, as in short, is a permanent forum of complaints for communities experiencing violations with impunity. So it's TPP therefore is a grassroots initiative, and the result of the need to create an independent tool for researching, analyzing cultural and cognitive development needed to start the process of liberation and justice of the people. So we started with 47 session in 2017, dedicated to to exposing the violations, the human rights violations experienced by migrants and refugees in Europe. So we started the hearing in Barcelona, followed by a hearing in Palermo, Italy, then in Paris. Then we had also one in London, and in Berlin, and the latest one was in I think held in Brussels, where the results of the the testimonies and the presentations of victims and of violence and human rights violation. So that was presented in the European Commission, and after this we had a meeting was also held in what's this in Germany to start a an alternative movement, an alternative pact, people's pact, with the aim of creating a solid a genuine solidarity for the rights of migrant and refugee people. So the aim, the purpose of this alternative pact is to restore the primacy of the human rights of individuals and peoples over the benefits and interests of states and transnational companies, and guaranteeing multilateralism and democracy in the United Nations. It also aims to promote self-determination, democracy, food sovereignty of the people, making possible the construction of a sustainable and supportive and fair local economies that guarantees the population of their right to live in dignity in their territories without being forced to any kind of displacement or desire for migration. And the third one is to guarantee the inalienable right for free movement of all people, promoting regional and international cooperation to establish public policies that ensure and protect those who have chosen to migrate from any violation of their rights in any part of the world, especially women, so children and refugees, for political, economic, climatic, and social reasons. So we are enjoining organizations, migrant and refugee organizations, and other movements and networks to join us, so that we can, create a people-to-people solidarity, uh, working from below, you know, uh, strengthening the grassroots initiatives. So so far we have more than 500, signatories to this Solidarity Pact, and we are still in the process of gathering more signatures, and hoping that more, more grassroots organizations and movements would participate in this, people to people solidarity, which I think upholds the rights of, all migrants and refugees wherever they are. So it's started in, as I've said, started in 2017, and it's still ongoing. So maybe after the pandemic, we will again organize a hearing in another, country. In fact, Greece is one of the countries that we are trying to see whether it's possible to organize a hearing here to for so that, the sentiments and the violations experienced by refugees, women, and the children will be exposed in this gathering of people. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important that while the state have their, own kind of solidarity, it's important that migrant organizations and refugee organizations should bind together to create a real, solidarity, where there's really a an empathy and respect for one's what's this uh, human rights, and respect for their, diversity and differences, you know yeah. So
Well, this is very interesting and very. We were watching the development of the tribunal basically since 2017, and I have to say that personally, I find it very well, a needed, I should say, action. At the time, we know where the idea of People's Tribunal come from. We know that it is kind of, it happens when the official justice fails. And that's why it is in a sense an alternative, but it for one thing, it's a good advocacy tool, and it's a good awareness raising tool as well, and to impose pressure on the actual structures, judiciary structures, for example, and also to document what is not being documented, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So all the, the testimonies and the presentations of migrants and refugees from all these different cities and different countries have been documented, and it's available. It's there's a website where, you can get all this information, all these, cases of, violations from different groups of or communities of migrants and refugees. So, and it's not just a documentation, but it's really a tool for, as you've said, for advocacy and pressuring national governments to come up with a pro people, a pro migrant and refugee, measures and policies.
Well, we will be looking forward if you do organize it in Greece. We would very much like to come and join you in this event. And I hope that it will be possible because of all of this current restrictions and the COVID situation, of course. Frohar, do you have any comments on such kind of initiatives that exist when the actual structures of power and states are failing us?
Well, I think it's a really, I mean, I haven't followed until now. I didn't know about this document, but or this strategy, and I think it's a really good idea, just to, like you say, to bring everyone together, to work together towards something positive, and it doesn't exist because from my experience, even EU has one pack, but then each member state have their own policies and procedures in regards to asylum and refugees and migration. So they need to come together if they want, if they want something positive, a positive outcome. And it's a really good initiative. And I think I'm gonna go and research further and read into it before I comment more, because honestly saying, I didn't know. I mean, yeah, I wasn't aware of this before.
Well, then, of course, the whole situation with differences between different states on migration and asylum policies, because European Union doesn't have the full competence to dictate in those policies, and it's a shared competence. They do to some extent, but largely it is at the discretion of the member states. And so far, this is the legal situation that we do not foresee being changed. So yes, in this sense, it is also very important. The grassroots initiatives, they're always, I think they are the most important. And if they don't exist, then we are in a big trouble. Do you have anything else final to add with regards to the whole Migration Pact, or anything else that you would like to say? Today's International Migrants Day.
Can I just say something about the pact, that as a woman and as a migrant woman, I really would like the policymakers or the commission to take women seriously, not just to mention women in the pact, but to have a section with clear measures on how clarify really like how things will happen if a woman comes to Europe. Or so there has to be a section, really clarified measures with a section about migrant women and migrant girls. And this is something that needs to be in the pack. And then also clear what you call instructions to all member states on how to deal with migrant women, migrant girls. Let's say if they go ahead with relocation return procedures, because all member states has to be in the same page. They cannot start having their own policies and then go under the pack as well. So they really need to make this really clear, and instead of having a colorful pack with pictures and instructions, to have a written document on step by step on how things will happen. This is something I would like to see on amended pack.
Debbie?
I think as a woman migrant and a refugee myself, I would like to see the pact with particular policies and measures to address the realities of migrant and refugee women. And they should do their homework by referring to CEDAW, general recommendation number 26, that requires states to come up to formulate gender sensitive rights, gender sensitive and rights-based policy on the basis of equality and non-discrimination, to regulate and administer migration policies that would facilitate access of migrant women to work and safe migration pathways. So I think if that will be included in the in the EU Pact, that's something that we could look forward.
Mhm. Well, I think it's a perfect ending in the recommendations. I'm just going to add to this that I'm exactly of the same opinion. First of all, I agree with both of you. Sorry, I appear now in the darkness. It's becoming already evening. Where I
Thank you.
but first of all, what Frohar mentioned, we need to implement what they call the positive measures. It's not enough, as they always do. They think that they put us under vulnerable. They're vulnerable persons, and we are somewhere appear as first of all, women are not only vulnerable person. Secondly, we're not vulnerable person by definition. It's the conditions that make women vulnerable.
Be vulnerable, yeah.
And there are a lot of other aspects of journeys and migration of women that are not necessarily has to do just with vulnerability. Women make decisions. Women take conscious decisions to seek for better life, and it's not so much about the vulnerability, but about the exercise of rights of women. So this is absent, but mentioning, as Frohar said, is not enough. We need to have a section. It's also a legal requirement, because we know that women are discriminated. They are discriminated throughout the migration journey, and they must have, as discriminated group, a particular chapter, a subchapter, where they will be dedicated specifically and solely to women and girls. And then to finish with the what you brought up, Debbie, about the legal framework, of course, and this is extremely worrying. The park does not mention any reference neither to Istanbul Convention, that also has Article 5961 on refugee women, nor to CEDAW, nor in fact to any other legal instrument concerning women's rights. And this is not acceptable, and we will continue doing what we can do in our limited capacities at the European Network of Migrant Women. And we do hope that the European Parliament will pay attention to this when they are discussing it before it goes to the Council of European Union. I'm going to finish here, and I'm going to take this opportunity to say Merry Christmas or whatever you're celebrating, both of you, and Happy New Year. And really thank you for taking time to speak today. I know everybody is extremely busy, and on this day, thank you, Debbie, thank you, Frohar, thank you for your contribution to our statement. And we will...
Merry Christmas to you too, Flora and Anna. So
Yes.
all the best.
Happy New Year.
The best, yeah. Okay, Happy New Year too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.